prior to my role at Essence, I was the global director of consumer engagement for the Estee Lauder companies. So left lipsticks, moved on over to media, and now I am the global vice president of brand activations for Essence Ventures. So under the Essence Ventures umbrella, there's Essence Communications that we all know and love, Essence Magazine. We also have BeautyCon, which is a beauty conference. There's also Essence Studios, which is our production arm. There's also Naturally Curly and other ventures under the Essence umbrella. So at Essence, I'm responsible for working with brands that come into the space and they really want to understand how to connect with the consumer, mostly Black consumer, Black woman consumer, which is Essence's bread and butter. So they want to know how to speak to the consumer and how to activate in the space that resonates best with our consumers. So that's the charge for my role and my team.
And so you left previous things. What made you so excited to go over and join the Essence family?
Yeah, I think very candidly speaking, I owe a lot of my career to Black women. Just within my family and my mentors, and I think women in general. So when I was given the opportunity, it felt kind of like a no-brainer to be able to serve women back in this type of role. To have not only in my previous roles, I was responsible for bringing consumers to the brand, and now it's really getting the brand to understand the consumer mindset and to meeting the consumer where they are. So it just felt like a natural fit.
I know everybody's really excited about what you're going to do there, the work you have planned. Before we get too deep into sort of the full luxury track and the conversation about your accomplishments in the past, I just have a few kind of get to know your luxury persona questions, right? Who are you from a luxury perspective? The first one is, what is the very first product that you bought that made you feel that now I'm a luxury consumer?
Oh boy, I remember this like it was yesterday. So the first product I actually ever bought was a little Coach bag. I was in college, and it was all the rave. I had just crossed my sorority and thought I should do something, special for myself. So I took my refund money, and I bought myself a Coach bag, and I thought, gosh, I really made it. So yeah, I actually still have that Coach bag. So I'll be passing it down to my daughter or something.
And I'll say one more of these questions. So now it's years since you crossed and you bought your Coach bag. What's your luxury indulgence now?
Ooh, so it's actually changed from product to experience. So I really enjoy some domestic duties like washing dishes, folding clothes. However, I don't always have the time for that. So my new luxurious pleasure is to send out my laundry, which I just started doing this year, and I always thought it was the strangest thing. I have tons of friends who do it, and I'm like, I like folding my own clothes, but I never had time to actually fold my own clothes, so it piles up clean clothes everywhere. So yeah, that's my new luxury spend, is to send out my laundry, which is a life changer.
I love that one because as a born and raised New Yorker, I've been doing that for a long time.
I couldn't imagine as a Southerner. Could not imagine it. Not folding my own
And
clothes.
so it took it when I moved down here to Miami, I moved to California, and I was like, well, there are gonna be places that take your laundry. I've been doing that one for a long time.
See? Hip to something new.
Okay. So I want to get into some of the conversation about just sort of your background. You look back at your career, your experience in luxury space, Mercedes, Estee Lauder. I'm sure there are a few lessons, right, you take away. What are the top 2 or 3 key lessons you will always take with you about working to engage luxury consumers?
I think the first thing that I would take away is authentic storytelling. So I think no matter, I've worked in a ton of different industries, automotive, beauty, now I'm in the media space, and it's really about connecting, a genuine connection. And I think you do that by authentic storytelling. And the consumers, we're smarter nowadays. We can see through the noise. So I think the first message is to always connect authentically and genuinely. And I think the second thing is to continuously enrich the retail experience, whether it's digital or whether it's physical. So I think because that's really the first touch point that a person might have with the brand. So I think authentic storytelling and connections, and then enriching the retail experience.
Very nice. I know at Mercedes you were working on pretty impressive projects and really successful in product development and luxury. Can you tell us about your work on the G-Wagon that redesign and how you approached it in terms of the legacy of the brand, maintaining that, protecting the legacy of the brand while catering to new luxury customers?
Yeah, I think that's actually one of the highlights of my career was I was responsible for the first redesign of the G-Wagon and the G-Class, and it was the first in its 40-year history, and I think that's kind of what catapulted my career. One of the things that was really important to me in maintaining kind of the heritage of the G-Class is the silhouette. So I was, very, very gung-ho, and we can change a lot of things about the vehicle, which in fact we change everything except for 4 items. But we really was, impressing upon the team that we have to keep the silhouette of the vehicle. Other than that, most people aren't taking a G-Class off-road. I mean, people live in California, Atlanta, no one's off-roading in a G-Class. So we wanted the suspensions to really be road-friendly, which prior to, it was built as a military vehicle, so that wasn't like the primary concern. And so people just dealt with it because it was like a cool vehicle. But I really wanted to make it road-friendly. So we made the suspension a lot softer, steering columns a lot softer. So easier to steer with one hand. You could never do that in the old G-Class. And so those were some of the components that I really wanted to bring over and make it more luxury, make it like an everyday driver, but keep the heritage still alive.
You mentioned that you changed everything except for the silhouette and 4 things. What were the 4 things and why were they important?
So there is, I don't know if anyone has been inside of a G-Class, but one of the things that was really important to me, there's a little badge when you open the door, it's called a shekel badge. And that just means that the vehicle has to be shekel-proof. Shekel is a mountain in Austria, so it goes up and down the mountain, a certain amount of times in order to pass our certification. It's not required of like the Austrian government or anything, but it was a requirement for Mercedes. So the shekel badges we kept intact, the window washers, the door locking mechanisms, and the spare wheel on the back. So those are the only 4 items.
The door locking mechanism?
Yeah, so the G-Class has an iconic locking noise that you hear. I always say it sounds like a vault, so you know where your money's going. But it has a very loud locking mechanism, so we have to keep that.
Is that sound available on TikTok?
It might be. It might be. Should make it my ringtone.
Okay, so you did some really impressive work at Mercedes, went over to Estee Lauder, and I know that at Estee you were trying to design and executing a really amazing campaign targeting the Black community with a brand called Celebrate Black Hair. Can you tell us about that campaign and what you learned about the importance of education in the luxury space?
Yeah, so this was my first experience in prestige beauty, and in kind of on my listening tour when I first joined the organization, I realized that there were so many enriching stories that the company had that just hadn't been told. And one really important story to me personally was their expansion of education when it comes to textured hair. And what I learned is that often cosmetology schools don't teach how to do textured hair. They may be a very small section, but there's no extensive breakout on how to care for and style, to help textured hair. And so Aveda in particular was the brand that I worked on, and they had this enriching story where they created an entire texture program, and they allowed other non-Aveda artists to also take that so that they were educated in how to work with textured hair consumers, which is like 65% of the population. Now imagine, you can't use 65% of the population's hair. It's crazy.
Yeah, they never had this before.
Yeah, and Aveda had this, and so we just really wanted to tell that story, and with the motto being that education brings understanding. And so we told the story just about the textured hair artists and what it meant to them to now have other people who are able to speak to them in their language about their hair. And then we also talked to some non-textured hair artists, some of the artists who had rougher experiences where they had someone sit in their chair and they couldn't offer them the best services and how that made them feel. So them having the knowledge to then empower their customer felt amazing for them too. So it was a campaign that was very successful for us, which is interesting because we didn't push product at all, and that was one of the best selling months for product. Back to storytelling, authentic storytelling. And so yeah, it was probably one of the campaigns I'm most proud of.
So when you look back at that campaign and the kind of impact, right, that it was able to have, do you think that what were the key insights in terms of developing? You talked about the importance of education and how that opened the door, but that also allowed you to maintain sort of quality and value of the product in people's eyes?
Most definitely, and I think oftentimes what happens is a consumer may not see themselves in a product or even in a brand, and so putting a woman of color into your campaign ad doesn't necessarily make me want to go buy your product. I have to really see myself, and it has to resonate with me. And so I think this opened the door for more artists to admit that maybe I don't know as much about texture hair as I thought I did. And so this is an opportunity for me to learn more and for me to have, expand my consumer base as an artist. And then also have these conversations with other artists. So I think it really started the conversation, and it allowed more consumers to see themselves in the brand in a more authentic way.
So as you mentioned, you worked across automotive, worked in you've had the opportunity to work across a lot of different consumer groups, particularly with luxury products, which is not always the case, right? What do you think are the key similarities, right, between marketing to mainstream luxury customer and now you're moving to black women in that space? What do you see as the similarities and differences between marketing?
Ooh, this is a good question. Honestly, I think there are more similarities than there are differences. I think at the end of the day, the luxury consumer just wants to be understood. They want their lives to be made easier. It's not always necessarily the price point. I mentioned my new luxury splurge is sending my laundry out. It's making my life easier. It's the convenience of things. And so I think I always bring everything back to experiences. People are like, oh, you've worked in so many different areas, you've done so many different jobs, and to me, the thread of all of these is, I like creating experiences for consumers, regardless of if it's a product and now media. And so I think one of the things that I want marketers to think about, of course, and brands to think about is how do we bring the best consumer experience, meet them where they are. And you have to understand your consumer in order to understand what their experience is. And I think that's really the only difference, is understanding what resonates with them. But I think at the end of the day, it's all about creating a seamless experience, one that resonates with them where they are, but then also have that aspirational aspect that brings a bit of luxury to it. Like, oh, maybe if I spent a little more, or maybe I could aspire for this type of experience, which is a little different than what I am used to, but it's something that I want to dive into.
You talked about trying to understand the customer, right? We've actually a few people today have talked about that during the earlier panels. How do you marry or mix, right, data and ingesting that and trying to use that properly, along with a connection with the communities you're trying to actually reach?
I'm data free, right? I love data, which is very weird being in a creative space. I think you have to have people within the community in order to voice, translate some of the data into real life, actionable insights. So I think there's kind of it's not necessarily a mix. I think it's very much a marriage of what is the data actually saying, what is the support from a numbers standpoint, because everyone, bottom line is king. but also have someone who can translate that data into the language of the consumer and not necessarily just into your own language, because you may not be a member of that community and understand what that means. You know, if you see an uptick in one area, it might be because something culturally is happening in that community that you have no insight into. So I think one important thing is, you know, putting the data into context. So I think it's always important to have a member of that community or multiple members, you know, as checkpoints. Because we don't know everything. Even within my own community, I don't know everything. So it's always good to have those checkpoints.
I 100% agree. Let's talk about your new role.
Yay!
You're going to be focused on developing, executing elevated luxury experiences, right, for Black women. How will you approach the need to continually innovate in how those activations really connect? There's always the next, there's always more, there's always what's the new experience, right? How are you and your team going to tackle it?
You know, I think that's the challenge that, which also makes it very interesting and very fun, is that everything is moving at such a fast pace. People's interests are changing, you know, based on what they watch. TikTok, I say, is the new Google all the time. Like, I don't make a purchase if I didn't look at it on TikTok. I look up restaurants on TikTok. It's become my Yelp, my Google, a lot of things. But I really think about listening to the community, and I've been mentioning like meeting the consumers where they are, but then also adding in that element of aspiration. You know, how do we take it to the next level? How do we treat them? And so a lot of that is just listening to what, you know, people have said that they wanted, but maybe they haven't dived into. Maybe it feels like a stretch for them, so we bring like a glimpse of that to them. And I think that's how you continue to elevate experiences and, you know, supported by data.
Always supported by data.
Always supported by data.
Okay. Luxury brands have historically faced challenges in delivering their messages to multicultural audiences or specific multicultural audiences. Do you see that shifting now, where you anticipate we'll see more brands specifically going after, say, Black and Hispanic consumers? And what do you believe will move the needle for brands in acquiring and keeping those kinds of multicultural consumers?
You know, I'm of the mindset that marketing, general marketing, should include multicultural marketing. I do not think that you should be separate. I think as we kind of move into this new face of what luxury looks like, the consumer is highly changing from what it was 20 years ago. The consumer is, you know, more melanated, the consumer is younger, the consumer is much more informed, okay? When I was 20 years old, I was, you know, happy to get like a North Face jacket, and my twin little sister is like talking about Gucci slides. Like the capitalism is wide. And so I think consumers and the access to these products and these experiences is a lot more available to younger, as I mentioned, like more informed consumers because of social media and because, you know, there's a young woman in my building in New York, and she is a student at NYU and pays the same amount of rent I do because she has all these brand deals from TikTok, so we talk about that all the time. But yeah, I think the access to this type of luxury lifestyle is much easier to attain for like younger consumers, and I think when marketers, they have to, you know, really incorporate this type of storytelling and brand connection in their marketing, because I don't think moving forward that the two can be separated. I think multicultural marketing has to be a part of general marketing, and I think you really have to understand that the face of luxury is changing and cater to that.
Okay, thanks. So it's time for questions. Okay, Rita's gonna come up.
Oh, yeah.
We are done with the
There's a lot
questions.
There's a lot of good information. I don't know if we caught the main points. My takeaway is for those of you who missed the morning sessions, find out who your consumer is, be everything to that person, and identify the things that truly bring them joy and value. She just sent out her laundry. Wait till she starts getting other people's drawers back. It might change her opinion. Because that's the next step after you send out your laundry.
Nightmare.
And then when your favorite Gucci blouse goes missing, then you might start appreciating doing your own laundry all over again. And questions from the audience? Gentlemen?
Thank you. Amazing conversation. I know luxury is aspirational. How do you bring people along to understand and appreciate luxury, right? My parents used to tell me if you buy something cheap and it breaks, it's actually expensive. But if you buy something that you love and you use over time, you understand the value.
That is a fantastic question. I think I would have to bring it back to experience. When I think about even luxury products or luxury goods, I think about how to make that experience, how to show someone that this can be seamlessly incorporated into their life to either enrich their lives in some way or to make it more convenient. So the laundry example, like it doesn't cost much, but if someone has shown me, oh wow, this enriches my life, and now I don't have to spend however long folding clothes, I think you really have to show the value, and I think showing the value doesn't just come monetarily, it comes from showing how it enriches their lives or makes their lives more convenient.
Fact. We have this debate in my house all the time because we like nice things, and nice things are luxurious, and then you think, I just spent all my money on this really expensive thing, and it broke the next day, and your spouse or your parents look at you and they're like, how did you spend all your money on this thing and it broke the next day? And you're like, I don't understand. It's handmade. You don't expect it to last. I've owned it. It's enough.
Yeah, and even when I shop for myself, I think about the cost per wear. And so if I buy something that isn't that expensive, I'm like, okay, I can have 5 wears out of this before it breaks. Or if I spend a little bit more, and I'm like, I don't have to do this shopping experience again for maybe 3 years or 4 years, or however long my coach bag, 20 years in that case. But yeah, so I think about things like that, like the cost per wear and how does it enrich your life. Now I can like back it up after 2 years.
Spark joy.
Spark joy, exactly.
Sparks joy, lifetime value of the customer. Thank you, panel. Do we have any other questions? I don't want to let them go. This was really, really useful. All right.
Thank you.
Great time.